Hi guys, on this lesson we are going to proceed with algebra. We are doing the fundamentals of algebra, right? So on the fundamentals of algebra, we are interested in ways and means and methods of how to do algebra. You have to know how to do algebra. So if you do not know algebra, you'll have a problem. Okay, so on our previous lessons, we have spoken about properties of real numbers. Before that, we spoke about real numbers. And we said in real numbers, we have one, natural numbers, those numbers that start from 1 to infinity, natural numbers. Secondly, we spoke about integers. And integers are numbers that run from negatives to the positives, of course, passing through 0. I am sure you still remember the number line, whereby you had your positives and your negatives. Number 3, we spoke about rational numbers. And we said rational numbers, they can be expressed by a specific formula, in fact. And that formula was R equal to M over N. And we put a restriction on that formula. We say N can never be equal to 0. Because if N is equal to 0, then R is undefined. This is what we discussed in our first lecture, in part 1 of the algebra fundamentals. And we said rational numbers are numbers that can be expressed as a simple ratio. Simple ratio. And then we proceeded to irrational numbers. I know most of you guys, they find a challenge. Most of you guys, I see, you find a challenge there. Most of the people get a real challenge, when it comes to irrational numbers. Do you know what irrational numbers are? You have to watch my first video of part 1 on algebra, the first one on algebra. Irrational numbers have got two things. They cannot be expressed as a simple ratio of two numbers. Number 2, when they are expressed as decimals, they just go on and on without stopping. Okay? We also discussed another important thing. Properties of real numbers. It's important, guys, that you understand these things because they come naturally. As you do your algebra, they just appear. So when you do your algebra, you must be in a position where you can identify and say, oh, this number, it's an irrational number. That one is a rational. That one is an integer, natural number. Once you are at that level, you are right in the basics. You've got your basics right. It means you are building a foundation. You'll go up step by step and understand algebra. We also spoke about properties of real numbers. And the properties of real numbers, we discussed 3 topics there. There were 3 subtopics on the properties of real numbers. The first one was a commutative property, where we spoke about the addition and the multiplication of 2 numbers or variables. And we stated that the order does not matter. You'll find that you may have A plus B is similar to B plus A. Also, you may have A times B is similar to B times A. We also spoke about associative properties. And lastly, we spoke about distributive property. Okay. So now, you need to grasp those concepts. I think when you count, I think we are now at number 7. We've got 7 properties that we've discussed. All of them must be in your head. They must be in your head for real. Because if they are not in your head, you will not be able to deal with algebra. You must store them in your head. These are tools. These are keys to unlock your potential in algebra. If you don't have keys, you can't open the door. These are keys. All right, guys. Now we are proceeding with part 2 of our algebra. And on part 2 of the Algebra Fundamentals, we are dealing with properties of negatives and the properties of fractions. We need to explain there. The most important thing that we need to understand when we deal about properties of negatives, what is the effect of multiplying a negative sign with another negative sign, or multiplying a positive sign with a negative sign, or multiplying a positive sign with a positive. So we must explore all of them. When we multiply, the answer is same as when you divide. So when you divide a negative by a negative, you get the same answer as when you are multiplying a negative by a negative. All right. Now I will start. I have done 6 of them to give you an understanding. 6. The first one we have a negative multiplying a positive. So here we have a negative 1 multiplying a positive a. Negative multiplied by a positive sign is equal to a negative. So we get a negative. Number 2, we are multiplying a negative with another negative. I think you can see on number 1 and number 2, we spoke about the properties of real numbers. Here they come again. And if I look at these number properties on number 1 and 2, I am thinking of which number property? Can you still remember? It's a commutative property. Okay, so a negative times a negative, it gives us a positive. That is what you must know. On the first one, you said negative times positive, it was a negative. Similarly, when you say negative, let me do this. I'm going to write it in red. Negative divided by a positive. The answer is negative. Okay. On the second one, a negative divided by another negative, you get a positive. On the third one, you have a variable or a constant, a number, represented by a, which is negative a, multiplied by negative b. You can see this property here, the property number 3, is similar to number 1. Here we have a negative and a positive. And when we multiply, and if you can remember, when we multiply two numbers, on the commutative property, we learned that the order does not matter. So you have a negative a multiplied by positive b. It will be similar to negative b multiplied by a positive a. So the answer, again, we're getting a negative. Why? We multiply the negative sign by another negative sign. We've already done it in case 1. Number 4, we're bringing back number 2. So a negative times a negative a times negative b, we get positive ab. All right. Number 5, we have a negative. So I put here 1 in red. There's a reason for that, to put 1 in red. Because there's nothing written. We know there's a 1. We just don't write it. Similarly, when you have variable x, you can have variable x. There is a 1 hidden here. Even with these variables you see here, these a and b's, they have 1s as coefficients. Unless the coefficient is greater or less than 1, then you write it. But otherwise, if it's 1, well, you just write it. You just write the variable. Automatically, we know there is a 1. So negative 1 multiplied by negative a, multiplied by a, we get a negative a. Negative 1 multiplied by a positive a, not negative, positive a, we get a negative a. And then we take a negative 1, we multiply it by a positive b, we get a negative b. And on number 5, we can see this number property we also dealt with is called a distributive property. You see these things, they come back on their own automatically. They come back. And this is the reason why you guys experience so much problems when you're doing algebra. You tend to believe that there are problems that are difficult, others are simple, others are moderate. There is nothing like that. It's like driving cars. You can't say there's a car that is difficult to drive, the other one is simple. All cars are the same. Of course, the difference when you're driving big trucks, horse and trailers, you need a different set of skills other than driving just a simple sedan. Because now you've got a head and 2 trailers, which they call superlink or interlinks. Okay. But here on algebra, luckily, rules apply to all algebra problems. You understand the rules, you understand the properties, you understand the principles, you apply them, all of them. And you must be able to identify each and every law, principle, rule, property, whatever they call it. You must be able to understand them to a point that you can identify them in an algebraic expression or in an algebraic equation. You will see, you will never have a problem. Number 6, you can see, is still the distributive property. Is similar to what we had discussed on number 5. Okay, right guys. I hope you understand the work that we're doing. Already, I see we have added. We had now studied about 7 different things, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, about 7. Now we're adding 6. Oh, the number is increasing, right? And I think you're taking notes. And the next lesson is about properties of fractions, as you can see. The properties of fractions, we are going to learn about addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division of fractions. I know most of you guys have forgotten fractions. You take things for granted. So you may find that your younger brother who's doing grade 6 or younger sister can do fractions much better than you. I'm telling you, because they are doing them. If I may ask a question, what is 3 over 2 plus 7 over 5? I can see you scratching your head. The answer is not really simple, straightforward. Do you know why? The rules. You've got to know the rules. I want you to be able to see why I emphasize on the understanding of properties, understanding the rules, understanding the fundamentals, understanding the properties, the laws. These are tools. They enable you to think in a mathematical way. You know, for you to do mathematics efficiently, you've got to understand the language of mathematics. Mathematics is a language. I'm going to demonstrate that experimentally when we start with algebraic expressions. Is where you are going to see that really algebra can be used as a form of language to express things, to express our thoughts, to express systems. Equations express many different systems. In fact, all systems that you see, they can be expressed algebraically, most of them using algebraic equations, while some may be complex equations. But the fundamentals is algebra. Okay. On the properties of fractions, I want to first give you types of fractions. These are types. I'm going to write in red. Types. These are types. These are types. Okay? types of fractions. We start with the most simplest one, the common fraction. Common fractions are fractions with a similar denominator. We all know that a fraction is a piece of a whole, and a fraction is represented by a numerator and the denominator. So a numerator is divided by a denominator. When denominators of different fractions are the same, we say these are common fractions. That's what we call them. They are common fractions because they've got common denominators, similar denominators. Secondly, we have proper fractions. Proper fractions have a numerator that is smaller than a denominator all the time. That never changes. The numerator will always be less than a denominator. I am putting a restriction. I will underline it in red. This restriction. A is a numerator, B is a denominator. B, the denominator, must always be greater than A, the numerator. That defines a proper fraction. Number 3, an improper fraction. An improper fraction, the numerator is always bigger than a denominator. Here, when the numerator is A and the denominator is B, the rule says numerator A must be greater than denominator B. I hope you can see. I have put the numbers. And I want to remind you guys, you see the numbers that I've written, 3 over 2, 1 over 2, 5 over 2, 1 over 3, 8 over 10, 5 over 4. We learned about them. What are they called? We call them rational numbers. What is the formula for expressing rational numbers? Is R equal to M over N. On the previous slide, I showed you that what you have learned before comes back automatically. This is a build-up. And here again we see real numbers. They come back. Types of real numbers. You've got to be able to see them. Okay. Number 4, we have a mixed fraction. A mixed fraction is characterized by a whole with a proper fraction. A whole with a proper fraction. I want to emphasize this. A whole and a proper fraction. Where does it come from? A mixed fraction. It comes from improper fraction. We said an improper fraction has got a denominator that is bigger than it's got a numerator that is bigger than the denominator. An example is 3 over 2. The numerator is 3, the denominator is 2. So when you divide 2 into 3, 1, you get 1. There is a remainder, which is 1 over 2. So you can see 1 is a whole, and a half, 1 over 2, is a proper fraction. We say it's a proper fraction because the denominator is bigger than the numerator. Number 5, we discuss a decimal fraction. A decimal fraction, we simply convert fractions and put them into decimals. So for instance, your 1 and 1 over 2, you'll have 1,5. Your 1 over 2, you'll have 0,5. How did you get this 0,5? 2 into 1. You have 1 over 2. 2 into 1. How many times does 2 go into 1? 1 is less than 2. So 0. Now we have 10 as a numerator. 2 into 10, 5. That is how we get this 0,5. So that's how you work. That is how you'll get your decimal fractions. Okay? I think so far so good. So far so good. I'm trying by all various means possible to make this understandable. I don't want you to be frustrated by algebra. Never again. Okay. Now I'm doing the last part, guys. I don't want to have long lessons. I want you to grasp, sufficient information at a particular time interval so that you can digest it in your brain. It's important. Otherwise, when the lesson is too long, others, well, I agree, they'll be very long, but I'll try not to be too long. So at least about 30, 40 minutes is fine. Now let us talk about the properties of fractions. We now understand types of fractions. Now, how do we multiply them? How do we divide them? How do we add? We need to do that operation. Okay. So, number 1, I will start with multiplication. The multiplication is simple. Simple. I did not say easy. Mathematics can be simple because in mathematics we simplify. But mathematics is not easy. Not at all. Not easy. But it can be simple. You need to simplify it. This is what I'm doing. I'm simplifying the basics of algebra, the fundamentals, so that you are able to use them as tools. So in the multiplication, we have A over B multiplied by C over D. The rule says we must multiply the numerators and multiply the denominators. We've done that. Well, let me correct. This is a C. This should be C. Okay. This should be C. Oh, come on. All right. Let me make this clear. I think it's clear. Fair enough. Okay. Now we are dividing these fractions. We have a fraction A over B divided by C over D. Now, there is one thing that we need to do, is to take one fraction and turn it upside down. just flip it over. Simple, right? So we are taking our a over b multiplied by the division sign changes into a multiplication sign. We have c over d. Now we have d over c. Just flipped it upside down. Now when we are here, we've already dealt with multiplication of fractions. You know what to do. Multiply the numerators and the denominators. You see, mathematics is a build-up. If we did not do multiplication, we were not going to understand what to do in step number 2 of the division of fractions. Number 3, we have a over c plus b over c. Here we have denominators, both of them are c, which means these are common fractions. And in common fractions, we keep the denominator and we add the numerators. This is what we are doing. A plus b over c. Simple. I think you know this. But most of you have forgotten number 4. We have a over b plus c over d. What do we do here? We first find the common denominator. We find the common denominator by multiplying b and d to get bd. We write bd, we draw the line. You bring back a, you open brackets, plus c, you open brackets. Now what do? You have bd here, bd, divided by b, b and b divide each other, we get 1. We're left with d. Okay, we put d here. And then we take this d, we have bd divided by d. This d and that numerator d, they'll divide each other, we get 1. We're left with b. So we have 1b here. When we multiply AD plus CB all over BD, that is it. I think it's clear. Number 5. What I demonstrated here is similar to what I just did here. I hope you can see. We had AC over BC, which is equals to A over B. Why? C numerator and C denominator divided each other. They gave us 1. Number 6. You have a fraction with an equal sign and another fraction on the other side. So this is an equation. You find a lot of this structure when you're solving for x. So here, how do we simplify this fraction? Simple. Not easy, simple. We do a cross multiplication, as I'm showing with the red arrows. You take a multiplied by the numerator of the left hand side, you multiply it with the denominator of the right hand side. Well, there is another way of doing this, the one that I prefer. You take this, but we will do it when we are solving for x. But for now, let us just say we do this cross multiplication. Simple. Okay, guys. So, please, you must like my page, like my video, distribute it to your friends. You can use the distributive property and share it amongst all your friends who are doing the same grade as you. But this work is applicable from grade 7 up to grade 12. These are basics of the algebra. You find that people who are the learners who are doing grade 10, 11, 12, they have algebraic mistakes when they are doing mathematics. whether they're doing exponential equations, exponential graphs, parabola graphs, hyperbolas, trigonometry, you find that there is a fundamental problem that they make. They all make the similar mistake. It's related to the fundamental principles of algebra. The principles of algebra. So you must share this with your friends. Okay. So we are done. The next lesson, on part 3 of algebra, we will be talking about exponents. Exponents. Very important. And roots. There is an exponent, there is a root. We are going to define those things first. And then we are going to work through them and see how they operate and be able to work with them. Okay, guys. Thank you. Enjoy the lesson.